Ambassador Sarah Chun walked through the massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber. Her small team of humans looked tiny next to the giant alien beings that filled the room. The chamber was huge, built for creatures much larger than humans. The ceiling stretched up so high that Sarah could barely see it. The aliens barely looked at her as she entered. They were busy talking among themselves, making jokes and laughing. Sarah had heard this kind of laughter before. It was the sound aliens made when they talked about humans. It was cruel and cold. Sarah's hand shook slightly as she held her datapad. Inside it was humanity's final message to the galaxy. She had spent weeks writing it, knowing that this would be the last time humans would try to talk peace with these creatures. For 50 years, humans had tried to be friends with the other species in the galaxy. They had tried to trade fairly, to share knowledge, to work together. But the aliens saw humans as weak. They saw them as useful only for hard work and dying in wars. The Kethver Empire was the worst. They were tall, strong creatures covered in thick armor like skin. They loved war and saw humans as good soldiers to throw at their enemies. When humans died in battle, the Kethver would just shrug and send more. The Zephyrian Consortium was different but just as cruel. They looked like giant insects with 4 arms and black eyes. They cared only about making money. To them, humans were cheap workers to dig in dangerous mines or work in factories that would kill most other species. The Voltar hegemony was the oldest and most proud of the alien powers. They looked like tall, thin beings with blue skin and large heads. They believed they were the smartest species in the galaxy. To them, humans were like clever pets that sometimes said interesting things. Sarah walked to the center of the chamber, where a small platform waited. Her footsteps echoed in the huge space. As she climbed onto the platform, the alien voices slowly grew quiet. Not because they respected her, but because they were curious about what the weak humans would say today. The Kethver War Marshal was the first to speak. His voice was deep and rough like grinding rocks. Why do the humans waste our time again? We have important matters to discuss. Sarah looked at her notes. She had written down all the terrible things that had happened to human colonies in the last month alone. The list was long. Last week, Kethver raiders attacked the human settlement on New Kyoto. Sarah began. Her voice was steady, but everyone could hear the pain in it. They killed 3,000 people, including children. They burned the hospitals and schools first. The Kethver War Marshal laughed. New Kyoto was built on land we claimed first. Humans should not have been there. The colony was founded 20 years ago with proper permits from the Galactic Council, Sarah replied. We followed all the rules. Rules change, said the Zephyrian Trade Minister. Her insect-like voice buzzed and clicked. That land has valuable minerals now. Humans cannot use them properly anyway. Sarah continued reading from her list. 2 weeks ago, Zephyrian forces captured 500 human miners from the Centauri belt. They are being forced to work in conditions that will kill them within months. The humans sign contracts, the Trade Minister replied. If they die, that is not our problem. They are weak. They signed contracts under threat of having their families killed, Sarah said. Business is business. The Trade Minister buzzed. Sarah's voice grew stronger as she read the next item. 3 days ago, Beltar ships fired on human evacuation vessels leaving the Tau Ceti system. The ships were carrying sick children to medical facilities. The Voltar delegates spoke in a voice that sounded like singing but cold and empty. The humans were in restricted space without permission. We warned them to leave. The children were dying, Sarah said. They needed medical help that only existed on the next planet. Not our concern, the delegate replied. Humans should learn to follow rules. The chamber filled with alien laughter again. Sarah heard the Kethver War Marshal talking to his aide about how funny It was that humans thought anyone cared about their problems. Sarah waited for the laughter to die down. Then she spoke again, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. For 50 years, we have tried to work with you. We have tried to find peaceful solutions to every problem. We have followed your rules, respected your claims, and asked for nothing but the right to exist. And we have allowed you to exist, said the Veltar delegate. You should be grateful. We have been patient when you stole our ships. We stayed quiet when you enslaved our people. We tried to understand when you killed our children. Sarah's voice was getting louder now. We hoped you would see that we could be friends instead of enemies. The HFY War Marshal stood up. He was 3 times taller than Sarah and covered in scars from 100 battles. Friends? Humans are too weak to be friends with real warriors. You are good for dying in our wars and working in our mines. Nothing more. You call us weak, Sarah said, stepping forward. But we have never started a war. You call us stupid, but we have never enslaved another species. You call us worthless, but we have never killed children for fun. The alien laughter grew louder and crueler. The Zephyrian trade minister clicked her mandibles together in amusement. Listen to the little human trying to sound brave. What will you do? Cry at us? Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out the datapad. She held it up so everyone could see. This contains humanity's final diplomatic message to the Galactic Council. For the last time, we ask you to stop the killing, stop the stealing, and stop the slavery. We ask you to treat us as equals and work toward peace. The chamber erupted in the loudest laughter yet. The HFY War Marshal banged his huge fist on his chair. Threats from humans? What will you do? Throw your soft bodies at our ships again. The Veltar delegate made a sound like singing mixed with hissing. Humans making demands. How amusing. You have no power here. The Zephyrian trade minister rubbed her 4 hands together. Perhaps we should charge the humans money for wasting our time with this nonsense. Sarah placed the datapad on the speaker's platform and pressed a button. The device began transmitting a signal across all communication channels in the galaxy. I am not making threats, Sarah said as she turned to walk away. I am giving you information. You have chosen to answer our requests for peace with violence and cruelty. You have chosen to see us as less than people. You have chosen this path. She walked toward the exit, her small team following behind her. The aliens were still laughing and making jokes. They did not notice that the datapad was sending a coded message to every human ship, colony, and station in the galaxy. As Sarah reached the doors of the chamber, she turned around one last time. Her voice carried clearly across the huge room. We gave you a choice. Remember that when you face what comes next. The doors closed behind her with a soft sound. The aliens kept laughing, not knowing that everything in the galaxy was about to change. The message from the datapad had only 4 words. Terra Protocol initiated now. The message reached every human in the galaxy within hours. On mining stations in the asteroid belt, human workers stopped their machines and walked away. On HFY military bases, human soldiers put down their weapons and headed for their ships. On Zephyrian trade worlds, human engineers shut down the equipment they had built and maintained for years. At first, the aliens thought it was some kind of strike. Humans had protested before, though never like this. The HFY commanders ordered their guards to stop the humans from leaving. But when they reached the barracks, they found them empty. Not just empty of people, but empty of everything. Beds, personal items, tools, even the furniture. Everything was gone as if humans had never been there at all. On the planet Zarium Prime, Governor Thekvar was having his morning meal when his aide rushed in. The aide was a Veltar who usually stayed calm about everything. Governor, we have a problem, the aide said, his blue skin darker than usual with worry. What kind of problem? Devar asked, not looking up from his food. The humans are gone. Gone where? We don't know. All of them. Every human on the planet just disappeared overnight. Dagvar finally looked up. What do you mean disappeared? Did they steal ships? Are they hiding somewhere? No, sir. They're just gone. The security cameras showed them going to their homes last night. But this morning, their homes are empty. Not just empty of people, empty of everything. It's like they were never here. Similar reports came in from across the galaxy. On every world where humans lived or worked, the same thing had happened. They had simply vanished, taking everything with them. The Zephyrian trade minister received an emergency call from her most profitable mining operation. The human engineers who ran the complex machines had disappeared, and now nothing worked. The machines were still there, but they would not start. The control system showed error messages that no one could understand. Send our own engineers, she ordered. We tried, came the reply. Our people can't figure out how the humans made these machines work. The designs don't match anything in our databases. It's like the humans were using completely different science. On Kethver Prime, the planetary defense shields began failing one by one. These shields had protected the homeworld for 100 years, maintained by human technicians who understood the old systems better than anyone. Now those technicians were gone, and no one else knew how to fix the shields. War Marshal Graktar stormed through the maintenance tunnels under the planet's surface, his heavy boots echoing in the darkness. His engineers followed behind, their portable lights dancing on the walls. How hard can it be? Graktar roared. Humans are stupid. If they can fix these machines, so can we. They reached the main shield generator, a massive machine that hummed with power. But the humming was wrong now. It sputtered and wheezed like a dying animal. Well? Graktar demanded. Chief Engineer Loktar studied the control panels with confusion. The systems are completely different from anything we know. The humans rebuilt everything using methods we don't understand. Without their documentation, we can't even tell what most of these parts do. Then figure it out. Sir, it would take years to reverse engineer this technology. Maybe decades. The War Marshal's face grew dark with anger. Are you telling me that humans, weak, stupid humans, built something we can't understand? Loktar looked uncomfortable. It appears so, sir. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. The Veltar discovered that their ancient archives, containing millions of years of history, had been corrupted. Only the human archaeologists had known how to maintain the old storage systems, and they had taken their knowledge with them. But the most disturbing reports came from the frontier worlds. Human colonies that the aliens had planned to raid or claim were found completely abandoned. Not destroyed, not conquered, just empty. The buildings were still there, but every piece of technology, every tool, every computer had been removed with surgical precision. What made it worse was that some of these colonies had been under surveillance. The Kethver had been watching the human settlement on Kepler 442b for months, planning to attack it and take the valuable farmland. Their spy satellites showed normal activity until midnight 3 days ago. Then the satellites went blind for exactly 6 hours. When they came back online, the colony was gone. Not just the people, the entire colony. Buildings, roads, power lines, everything had vanished without leaving a trace. The farmland was still there, but it was now wild grass and empty fields, as if humans had never lived there at all. Ambassador Krix of the Veltar tried to contact Earth directly. He was one of the few aliens who had always been somewhat respectful to humans, and he hoped they would talk to him. The communication went through, but instead of a human voice, he heard only a recorded message. The human species has officially withdrawn from galactic civilization. All treaties, trade agreements, and diplomatic communications are hereby terminated permanently. Human space is now closed to all non-human vessels. Do not approach our territory. This message will not be repeated. Crix tried to send a reply, but his messages came back with an error. Recipient does not exist. The three major powers held an emergency meeting on the neutral station, Harmony Point. The station itself was having problems and had been built and maintained, partly by human engineers, and now critical systems were failing. This is clearly some kind of terrorist attack, declared War Marshal Graktar. The humans have stolen our technology and are hiding somewhere, probably planning to attack us. The Zephyrian Trade Minister's forearms moved nervously. My analysts estimate we've lost 30% of our industrial capacity overnight. These humans, they were more important to our economy than we realized. The situation is unprecedented, said Veltar Ambassador Crix. In all our recorded history, an entire species has never just left. They didn't leave, Graktar insisted. They're hiding, probably in the outer systems, building weapons. What if they did leave? Asked the trade minister. What if they found a way to go somewhere we can't follow? Impossible, scoffed Graktar. Humans don't have that technology. They barely managed to reach space before we found them. But privately, all three leaders were worried. The humans had been everywhere in galactic society, not as leaders or powerful figures, but as workers, technicians, and specialists who kept things running. Now that they were gone, it was becoming clear how much the galaxy had depended on them. On his ship returning to Veltar space, Ambassador Crix stared out at the stars and wondered what humanity had really been doing for the past 50 years. Everyone knew humans were good at fixing things and working in dangerous places. But what if they had been learning something else? What if they had been preparing for this day? A week later, the three powers made a joint decision. They would send their combined fleets to the Sol system and take human technology by force. Whatever tricks humanity was using, they could not stand against. The military might of three galactic empires working together. They assembled the largest fleet in galactic history, 2,400 warships from three civilizations, armed with the most advanced weapons known to exist. If humans wanted to play games, they would learn what real power looked like. As the massive fleet jumped toward human space, its commanders felt confident. Humans had always been weak. Even if they had some new tricks, they were still just one small species against the might of the galaxy. They had no idea what was waiting for them in the darkness around Earth. They had no idea that humanity had spent 50 years preparing for exactly this moment. And they had no idea that they were flying towards something that would change everything they thought they knew about reality itself. The fleet jumped towards Sol, carrying the fury and pride of three empires. But in the space between stars, something vast and patient was already watching them come. The combined fleet of 2,400 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. Admiral Dexkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, a massive Kethver dreadnought called Galaxy's Fist. Around him, thousands of alien warriors prepared for what they expected to be an easy victory. Scan for human ships, Dexkar ordered. The sensor officer, a young Kethver with fresh armor, worked at his station for several minutes. Finally, he looked up with confusion. "Sir, I'm not detecting any ships at all." "What do you mean, no ships?" "I mean there are no spacecraft anywhere in this system, sir. No stations, no defensive platforms, nothing. It's like the humans abandoned their own home." Dexkar smiled cruelly. "The cowards ran away from their own planet. This will be easier than we thought." But as the fleet moved deeper into the system, strange reports began coming in from the sensor teams. Captain Velanara of the science vessel Eternal Query was the first to notice something wrong. "Admiral," she called over the communication system, you need to see this. What is it? Dexcar demanded. The asteroid belt, sir. It's been changed. Changed how? It's arranged in perfect geometric patterns. Every asteroid is exactly the same distance from its neighbors. They form shapes that couldn't happen naturally. Dexcar looked at the display screen. The asteroid belt, which should have been a random collection of rocks, was instead organized into perfect spirals and circles. It looked like someone had taken millions of asteroids and arranged them like pieces on a game board. How is this possible? Asked Commander Zekalon. I don't know, sir, Captain Velanara replied. But there's more. I'm detecting artificial structures inside the asteroids. Every single one has been hollowed out and filled with technology. What kind of technology? I don't know. It doesn't match anything in our databases. The energy readings are strange. As the fleet continued toward the inner planets, more impossible sights appeared. The planet Mars was covered in massive installations that formed geometric patterns across its entire surface. Lines of blue energy connected the installations, pulsing with a rhythm like a heartbeat. What are those humans doing down there? Muttered Dexcar. The answer became clear as Earth came into view. The blue planet that humans called home now had enormous ring structures around it. These weren't simple orbital platforms. They were massive, constructions that seemed to stretch from the planet's surface all the way to the outer system. Space elevators. But unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were made of materials that bent light around them, creating rainbow patterns in space. Streams of energy flowed along the elevators, connecting Earth to the modified asteroids and the installations on Mars. This is impossible, whispered Chief Science Officer Mordick. The engineering required to build something like this. It would take a civilization thousands of years. Humans have only been in space for a few hundred years, said Commander Zekalon. Then how did they build all this? Before anyone could answer, something even stranger happened. The navigation systems on every ship in the fleet began showing impossible readings. According to the instruments, they were still moving toward Earth, but they were also somehow moving backward and sideways at the same time. Navigation error, Dexcar barked. Fix it? Sir, it's not an error, the navigation officer replied, his voice shaking. According to all our instruments, we're moving through space that doesn't follow normal rules. That's nonsense. Space is space. But as the officer spoke, everyone on the bridge could see that he was right. Through the viewports, the stars were moving in patterns that hurt to look at. Some stars appeared to be in front of the ship and behind it at the same time. Others seemed to be moving backward through time, growing younger as they watched. What's happening to us? Someone whispered. The answer came as a transmission, but not through their radio systems. The voice appeared directly in their minds, as if someone was standing next to each person and speaking into their ear. You came to take what we built, the voice said. It was calm and gentle, like a teacher speaking to confused children. But first, you must understand what we are. The voice belonged to Sarah Chun, the human ambassador who had warned them in the Galactic Council. But something was different about her now. When she appeared on their screens, she looked exactly the same as before, but there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there during their last meeting. Something vast and deep and completely unafraid. We know you expected to find primitive humans cowering behind weak defenses, Chun continued. You thought our ships would try to fight your superior technology. You believed we would beg for mercy as you destroyed our world. Dexcar found his voice. What have you done? What is this place? This is our home, Chun replied. But more than that, it is proof of what we learned during the 50 years you spent teaching us to hate you. On the main display, images began appearing. They showed human scientists working not with the energy-based technology that other species used, but with something completely different. While the galaxy had mastered control over matter and energy, humans had learned to manipulate something far more fundamental: space and time themselves. You saw us as primitive because we used simple rockets and basic computers, Chun explained. You never asked why we chose those tools. You never wondered what we were really studying while you conquered and enslaved and killed. The images showed human laboratories where scientists worked with devices that folded space like paper. They showed human engineers who built machines that could step outside of normal time. They showed human children learning to think in ways that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute rules. We didn't build better spaceships, Chun said. We learned to fold the universe around us. We didn't create more powerful weapons. We developed the ability to edit reality itself. To demonstrate, something impossible happened. A small Zephyrian escort ship, fully crewed and armed, simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not damaged, it became as if it had never been built. The crew of its sister ship remembered it being there, but their instruments showed it had never existed. This is impossible, Dexcar said, but his voice was no longer confident. You keep using that word, Chum replied. It doesn't mean what you think it means. Around the fleet, the laws of physics began changing. Gravity stopped working consistently. On some ships, the crew found themselves floating, while on others, they were pressed to the floor by forces that shouldn't exist. Time flowed differently on different decks of the same vessel. Some weapons tried to fire, but discovered that the space around them no longer supported the chemical reactions that made explosives work. Stop this, Dexcar demanded. Fight us properly. We tried to fight you properly, Chun replied, her voice still gentle but now tinged with sadness. For 50 years, we fought you the way you expected to be fought. We used diplomacy, trade, and law. We appealed to your sense of justice and mercy. We hoped you would learn to see us as people instead of things. Through the viewports, Earth was growing larger, but it no longer looked like a planet. The ring structures, the energy streams, the connection to the modified asteroids, they all formed a single, massive construction. It was a device that made the entire solar system into something like a musical instrument, tuned to play songs with reality itself. Every time you killed our people, we had the power to kill yours, Chung continued. Every time you enslaved our children, we could have enslaved your entire species. Every time you mocked our weakness, we could have shown you what real power looks like. Why didn't you? Dexcar asked. Because we hoped you would choose to be better than that. We hoped that if we showed you patience and mercy, you would learn to show the same to us. The alien fleet hung in space that no longer followed normal rules. Surrounded by technology they couldn't understand, facing beings they had underestimated in every possible way. But you made your choice, Chun said. And now her voice carried the weight of 50 years of sorrow and anger. You chose cruelty over kindness. You chose slavery over freedom. You chose genocide over peace. What are you going to do to us? Dexcar whispered. Chun's image smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the expression of someone who was about to do something necessary but unpleasant. We're going to show you what it means to truly understand the consequences of your choices, she said. And then we're going to give you one final chance to choose again. The alien fleet hung trapped in space that no longer obeyed normal rules. Admiral Dexcar gripped his command chair as the deck beneath his feet shifted between being solid metal and empty air. Around him, his crew struggled to understand what was happening to them. Then Sarah Chun stepped through the wall of his ship. She didn't use a teleporter or any visible technology. She simply walked through the thick metal hull as if it were air, her footsteps making no sound on the deck that kept changing between solid and liquid. This is impossible. Deshkar whispered for the 100th time. You built your entire civilization on the idea that some things are impossible. Chun replied, standing calmly in the middle of his bridge while reality bent around her. You told yourselves that peace was impossible, that justice was impossible, that treating other beings with kindness was impossible. Other humans began appearing throughout the fleet, walking through walls and energy shields as if they weren't there. But these weren't the same humans the aliens remembered. They moved differently now, as if they were only partly present in normal space. What have you become? Asked Captain Velanara from her science ship. We became what we needed to become to survive you, replied Dr. James Park, materializing on her bridge. For 50 years, we asked ourselves the same question over and over. How do we protect our families from beings who see us as things instead of people? The answer, it turned out, had been to stop playing by the rules that made such cruelty possible. You mastered energy and matter, explained Dr. Lisa Wong as she appeared on the Zephyrian command ship. You learned to manipulate gravity and bend metal to your will. But while you were conquering space, we were learning something different. Around the fleet, displays began showing the true scope of what humanity had accomplished. The Sol system wasn't just rearranged, it had been transformed into a single vast machine. Every asteroid, every planet, every stream of energy was part of a construction that existed partially outside normal reality. We learned to step outside the universe and work on it from the outside. Cha explained as she gestured to images of human scientists working in spaces that couldn't exist. While you fought over resources and territory, we built tools that could edit the fundamental laws of physics themselves. To demonstrate, Chun reached out and touched a control panel on Dexkar's bridge. Her hand passed through the metal surface, but somehow she was still able to operate the controls. The ship's weapon systems activated, but instead of firing energy blasts, they produced flowers. Real, living flowers that floated through space without wilting. We could have done this to you at any time, said Dr. Park aboard the science vessel. When you raided our colonies, we could have turned your weapons into art supplies. When you enslaved our people, we could have made your slave ships into schools. When you killed our children, we could have transformed your warriors into gardeners. Why didn't you? Admiral Dexkar asked, his voice barely a whisper. Because we believed you could choose to be better, Chun replied. We thought that if we showed you patience and forgiveness, you might learn to show the same to others. But the demonstration was far from over. Chun raised her hand, and suddenly every alien in the fleet found themselves experiencing something impossible. They were seeing the galaxy from human eyes. It wasn't a vision or a dream. It was real memory, real experience, flowing directly into their minds. Admiral Dexkar found himself standing in a human settlement as Kethver raiders burned buildings around him. He felt the terror of human parents as they watched their children being dragged away. He experienced the helpless rage of human diplomats who were ignored and mocked by creatures who refused to see them as people. Captain Velanara experienced the slow death of human miners in Zephyrian facilities, breathing poisonous gases while their captors calculated profit margins. She felt the desperate hope of human engineers who built better and better machines, hoping that if they made themselves useful enough, maybe the aliens would stop killing them. Commander Zekalon lived through the massacre at New Kyoto, feeling every bullet that tore through human bodies, hearing every scream as families were separated forever. He experienced the quiet despair of human parents who taught their children to expect cruelty from the stars. The experiences went on and on. 50 years of human suffering poured through alien minds that had never bothered to imagine what their actions felt like to their victims. They felt every death, every betrayal, every moment of lost hope. But more than that, they began to understand what humanity had become in response to this treatment. Do you see now? Chun asked as the memories continued. Do you understand what we built while you were teaching us to hate? The aliens saw human laboratories hidden in asteroid mines, where scientists worked on projects that no other species could imagine. They saw human children learning mathematics that treated time and space as variables to be solved. They saw human engineers who built machines that could reach outside reality and change it from the outside. Most importantly, they saw the choice humanity had made over and over again. Every time they gained enough power to destroy their enemies, they chose not to use it. Every time they could have taken revenge, they chose to hope for peace instead. We could have unmade your species when you first attacked our colonies, Dr. Wang explained as the visions continued. We had the power to edit you out of history, to make it so you had never existed at all. But we didn't, said Dr. Park. We hoped you would learn. We hoped you would grow. We hoped you would choose to be the kind of people who deserve to exist among the stars. The mental connection deepened, and the aliens began to see not just human memories, but human understanding. They saw how humanity had learned to step outside the normal flow of time and space. They saw the tools and techniques that allowed humans to work with reality, like artists working with clay. Admiral Dexcar watched in amazement and horror as he understood how humans had spent their time whilst appearing to be weak. Every human death had taught them something new about the nature of consciousness. Every act of cruelty had shown them another way that reality could be broken and reshaped. Every moment of suffering had been turned into knowledge that could remake the universe itself. This is what 50 years of your teaching gave us, Chun said, her voice echoing in dimensions that normal minds couldn't perceive. You taught us that the universe is a place where the strong can hurt the weak without consequence. You taught us that mercy is weakness and that kindness is foolishness. Around the fleet, space itself began to change. The stars rearranged themselves into new patterns. Planets appeared and disappeared like thoughts in a vast mind. The very concept of distance became negotiable, as if the universe was waiting to be told how large it should be. So we learned to change those rules, Chung continued. We learned to build a universe where kindness is strength and where cruelty becomes impossible. Impossible how? Captain Velinara asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. We're going to show you, Chun replied. But first, we want you to understand something important. What's about to happen to you isn't punishment. It's not revenge. It's a gift. The human figures throughout the fleet began to glow with soft light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. We're going to give you the ability to choose again, Chun said. But this time, you'll understand the real consequences of your choices. What does that mean? Dexcar demanded. Chun smiled, and for the first time since the fleet had entered human space, her expression was genuinely warm. It means we're going to make you into the kind of people who deserve to live among the stars, she said, whether you want to or not. The transformation began with light, not ordinary light, but something that seemed to come from beyond the normal universe. It flowed through the alien fleet like water, touching every being aboard every ship. Admiral Dexcar watched in amazement as the light passed through his body without harming him, but somehow changing something deep inside his mind. What are you doing to us? He asked, though his voice carried more curiosity than fear now. We're giving you the gift of understanding, Sarah Chun replied. She stood in the center of his bridge, but now she seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. For thousands of years, your species have believed that strength comes from causing pain to others. We're going to show you what real strength looks like. The light was spreading through space around the fleet, reaching out toward the distant stars. Where it touched, reality became more flexible. Physical laws remained the same, but they were no longer absolute. The cruel mathematics of power and oppression began to soften. Throughout the fleet, aliens were experiencing something none of them had ever felt before: perfect empathy. not just understanding what others felt, but feeling it themselves. Every act of cruelty they had ever committed was now experienced from the victim's perspective. Commander Zekalon found himself reliving the raid on New Kyoto. But this time he felt every human death as if it were his own family being killed. The pain was overwhelming, but it didn't break him. Instead, it taught him something he had never known before, that other beings' suffering was as real and important as his own. Captain Velanara experienced the slow death of human miners in Tindazun, Zephyrian facilities. But now she understood that the humans weren't just resources to be used up. They were people with families and dreams and hopes that deserved to be protected. For the first time in her life, the concept of profit seemed less important than the concept of compassion. This is what we learned during our 50 years of suffering, explained Dr. James Park as he appeared on ship after ship throughout the fleet. Every time you heard us, we felt not just our own pain, but your pain as well. We understood that beings who choose cruelty are usually beings who have been hurt themselves. The light continued to spread, reaching beyond the fleet toward the home systems of the three galactic powers. On Kethver Prime, warriors who had spent their lives celebrating violence suddenly found themselves unable to raise weapons against innocent beings. The concept of unprovoked attack became literally unthinkable. On Zephyrian trade worlds, corporate executives discovered that they could no longer see sentient beings as property to be bought and sold. The idea of enslaving another person produced a physical revulsion so strong that many of them became sick just thinking about it. In Veltar space, the ancient computers that have calculated the value of different species based on their usefulness began displaying new messages. All sentient life has infinite value. Recalculation unnecessary. You're changing us, Admiral Dexcar realized. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. We're giving you a choice, Chung corrected. The same choice we had when we first gained this power. You can choose to embrace what you're becoming, or you can choose to resist it. What happens if we resist? Nothing violent, Dr. Lisa Wong assured him as she materialized nearby. We're not going to hurt you or kill you, but you'll find that the universe is no longer willing to support the old ways of thinking. To demonstrate, Chun gestured toward the fleet's weapon systems. Try to fire at an unarmed target. Dexcar looked around his bridge. His weapons officer was already working at his station, but the controls weren't responding normally. According to the displays, all weapon systems were functioning perfectly. But when he tried to target the human construct around Earth, the weapons simply wouldn't fire. The targeting system won't lock onto anything that isn't actively threatening us, the weapons officer reported. It's like the ship has decided it won't participate in unprovoked attacks. Your technology isn't broken, Dr. Park explained. It's just no longer willing to help you cause unnecessary suffering. The ships themselves have been touched by the change, and they've chosen to become part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Throughout the galaxy, similar changes were taking place. Weapons designed for attacking civilians stopped working. Slave ships found their holding cells opening by themselves. Prison camps discovered that their guards could no longer bring themselves to mistreat prisoners, but the changes went deeper than technology. The aliens themselves were transforming, gaining the ability to truly understand the consequences of their actions. Some embraced this transformation eagerly, grateful to finally understand why their old ways had felt so empty. Others fought against it, trying desperately to hold on to the familiar cruelty that had defined their civilizations for millennia. But they found that the universe itself was no longer willing to support their efforts. Weapons designed for conquest transformed into tools for construction. Armies found themselves compelled to protect rather than attack. This isn't fair, protested a Kethver captain whose ship had begun converting its weapon foundries into schools. You're forcing us to change against our will. Is it less fair than what you did to us? Asked Dr. Wong gently. For 50 years, you forced us to live in fear, to watch our children die, to see our dreams crushed. We're not forcing you to change. We're just making it impossible for you to force others to suffer. 5 years later, the galaxy was a very different place. Some worlds had embraced the transformation completely, becoming centers of learning and cooperation that the galaxy had never seen before. Former HFY warriors worked alongside human engineers to build hospitals instead of weapons factories. Zephyrian traders discovered that helping others succeed was more profitable than exploiting them. Veltar scholars shared their ancient knowledge freely, finding that teaching others brought them more satisfaction than hoarding information. But other worlds resisted the change, trying to maintain their old ways of thinking. These places didn't become war zones. Violence had become literally impossible for those touched by the human transformation. Instead, they became isolated, cut off from the growing network of cooperation that was spreading across the galaxy. On Earth, Sarah Chun stood in a garden that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. Around her, children from a dozen species played together, learning to think in ways that treated kindness and wisdom as the highest forms of strength. Do you regret giving them the choice? Asked Dr. Park, joining her among flowers that grew in colors that had no names. No, Chun replied. Choice is what makes us human. The fact that some of them choose to resist just proves that their transformation is real. We didn't make them into puppets. We gave them the ability to become the best versions of themselves. And those who refuse. Chun looked up at the stars, where ships from the cooperative worlds traveled freely, while the isolated systems remained alone with their chosen bitterness. They chose their path, she said, just like we warned them they would. They can change their minds at any time. The door is always open. But we won't force them to walk through it. In the distance, a new ship was approaching Earth. It carried a delegation from a species that humanity had never encountered before, beings from the far edge of the galaxy who had heard stories about the transformation and wanted to see it for themselves. Another first contact, Dr. Park observed. Another choice, Chun agreed. They can choose to join the cooperative galaxy, or they can choose to remain isolated with the holdouts. But either way, they'll understand what their choice really means. The ship landed in the dimensional garden, and strange beings emerged. Tall, crystalline creatures that communicated through patterns of light. Their first message was simple. We have heard that you give beings the power to choose kindness over cruelty. We wish to understand this. Sarah Chun smiled and walked forward to greet them. Behind her, the garden bloomed with flowers that existed in impossible colors. And children from a dozen species continued to play in the spaces between dimensions. The galaxy was still learning what it meant to choose compassion over conquest. Some chose wisely, some chose poorly, and some were still making up their minds. But for the first time in galactic history, everyone understood the real consequences of their choices. And in the space between the stars, humanity watched and waited, ready to help those who chose kindness and patient with those who didn't. They had learned, during their long suffering, that the best gift they could give the galaxy wasn't conquest or revenge thought. It was the simple, revolutionary idea that every being in the universe deserved the chance to choose to be better than they were. The universe itself had become a place where such choices were not just possible, but inevitable. And that, Sarah Chun thought as she welcomed the new visitors, was the most human thing of all.